he took a forceps and he put it in Pam's womb, and then he started to do this. It was so terrible. You wanted a natural baby, I gave you a natural baby, but as for you, you will never deliver again. And then I got a call, and the person on the other line was like, your daughter is late. Which mortuary must we take her to? It was Dr. van der Walt. How do you deliver such news to a mother?
The increasing numbers of medical malpractice litigation claims in South Africa against the state is staggering and poses a huge threat to healthcare provision. By the end of the 2016-17 fiscal year, government faced contingent liabilities, that is the cost if all claims were successful, of 56.1 billion rands. Now this equates to almost a third of the 170.9 billion rands consolidated health budget for the year 2016-17. Now the Eastern Cape Health Department's figure rose from 16.8 billion rands in the 2016-2017 year to 24.3 billion in the following year 2017-18. In Gauteng, the figure rose from 17.8 billion rands to 22 billion rands in the same year, while Limpopo's more than doubled from 2.1 billion to 4.3 billion rands. Now, this increase in medical legal claims is reported to have been driven by a combination of factors such as deteriorating public health care services, limited state legal capacity, greater patient awareness, corruption, and changes to the road accident fund. Now, the impact on the healthcare system is devastating. The more damages to be paid, the less money is available for service delivery, the poorer the quality of the services rendered, and the more room for negligence and error, and of course, the more claims. So today we discuss medical malpractice and litigation. We'll be joined in studio by a chairperson of the Medical Legal Committee of the South African Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, president of the Health Professions Council of South Africa, and a legal manager from Ethical. Now, be part of the show by asking the panel some questions or simply just sharing your views with us. The number to call is Johannesburg 714-6918 or 6919. You can also tweet us at SABC Health Talk or simply interact with us on our Facebook page, SABC Health Talk. So sit back, relax, and learn from this bumper show ahead, coming to you just after a short break. I'm Dr. Seloma Daung, and this is Health Talk.
Life can throw all sorts of surprises at you, often when you least expect it.
Sorry, Mom.
That's why it's important to have medical cover. Me? I didn't want just any medical scheme. I wanted a scheme that I could rely on, that I could talk to at any time, that I could afford. I didn't just get medical aid. I got medical paid.
Everyone wants a dignified funeral.
That is what a clientele funeral plan can give you. Lasting dignity.
I just want my family to be there, all relaxed, not worrying about paying for anything, knowing that clientele covered everything.
I would like a dignified funeral, and the rest should be invested for my children's future.
Clientele funeral plans pay out in 24 hours. We will even send 200 Rand airtime. You can cover up to 13 people on one plan. Plans include grocery, unveiling, and transport benefit. Plus, you can get all your premiums back.
I told my family, I don't want a fancy funeral. They must come there for a cook sister and a sandwich, and then they must use the rest of the money for their future.
I will never stop paying my monthly premium. To me, paying my monthly premium is as important as buying groceries.
SMS LIFE to 31043 and we'll call you back.
Buyiswa Daweti's 22-year-old daughter Pamela hid her pregnancy for 6 months from her unsuspecting mother.
I was hurt, I was shocked, as any other mother. But at the end of the day, as a mother, I had to accept.
At the time, Daweti was also pregnant with twins, and Dr. Danny van der Walt was her gynecologist.
To me, it made sense that we can use the same gynecologist, which was Dr. van der Walt, my gynecologist that I trusted. We were given a date for the 15th for natural birth.
From day one, Pamela decided on natural birth. But her gynecologist changed his mind a few hours before Pamela was to give birth, with no reason, and told her he would do a cesarean. She phoned her mother in distress.
And then she called me and said, Mama, the nurses say the doctor says he's gonna do a cesarean. And I don't know why, because I feel like fine. So when I got there, the nurse came to me before I even saw Pam. And then she said, no, the doctor said, because she's still fine, let's continue to give her the opportunity to give natural birth.
The gynecologist's arrival to check on Pamela a few hours before delivery and the procedure left Buyiswa Daweti uneasy.
When I saw this doctor, immediately I could smell alcohol. Then she went to perform the procedure to check how far she was, and the way he was performing it was so terrible, Zama. You can see, no man, this person agayedwanga, you know, he's under influence. But okay, he's a doctor, and the nurses were like, no, she's gonna be fine, ma.
Pamela's delivery was horrific, according to her mother.
I will never forget the brown and rusty jacket he was wearing. He took it off on the floor. He was worse than 7 o'clock, Zam. He was worse. The head was already, you know, and then he held the head and then pull and then stopped and then put the hand and then started to dig, you know, started to dig. I don't know what he was doing, Zama, but he could see all 3 of us, we were like, what's going on? And then he said, I'm just positioning the head. As if it was not enough, he took a forceps and he put it in Pam's womb, and then he started to do this. It was so terrible. So he was digging like this, digging like this. That chief of nurse, Zama, ran out and left me and that assistant nurse there with this doctor. I think they couldn't take it or watch it, what he was doing. Then he then said, push, and then she delivered.
The words that came from the doctor broke Buyiswa Daweti.
You wanted a natural baby, I gave you a natural baby. But as for you, you will never deliver again. What statement is that? How could he utter such a statement? What did he do to her womb for him to be sure that she will never deliver natural again?
The arrival of the baby was to be followed by the worst ordeal.
He started to stitch Pam non-stop. I was like, what is going on, Father? Then I was like, let me just get out and, you know, go and pray. She must just make it out of this room. As I was going out, and then I could see my daughter's vagina. It was just a mess. There was a long, ragged wound where he couldn't put together. He was taking just a piece there and do this, a piece there.
After delivery, Pamela had lost a lot of blood and looked pale. The doctor took her to the theater to remove her womb. When he couldn't because of her having lost too much blood, he left her and went home. She was given 20 liters of blood and later succumbed to her death at the hospital's intensive care unit.
All right, so we're going to come back to that story because today we're really talking about medical negligence or malpractice and the related litigation. And to help us with that in our studio, let's first welcome Professor Leon Snyman, who's chairperson of the Medical Legal Committee at SASOG, or South African Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Welcome to Health Talk, Prof.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to represent SASOG on your show.
All right. And of course, next to him is, of course, our very own regular Dr. Khosile Tlhape, who's the president of the Health Profession Council of South Africa. Welcome to Health Talk once again.
Thank you for the invite, and thank you to the viewers.
All right. So gentlemen, let's start from the beginning. Of course, before we forget, we also have JP Ellis joining us from our studio in Cape Town. Now, JP is the legal manager of a company called Ethical. JP, I hope you're with us. Welcome to Health Talk.
Good morning, and thanks very much for the invitation.
All right. JP, we're going to come back to you shortly. Let's start here in Joburg. Gentlemen, let's start with the basics. We're talking, and let's make it simple for our viewers out there, we're talking malpractice or negligence. What is it that we're talking about when we refer to as malpractice?
When we refer to that, I think what we are talking about is standard of care.
Right.
So there are different things that would determine what the standard of care for a certain condition or a problem is.
Right.
So there are what we call evidence-based medicine. There are guidelines. So I think it's reasonable to say that for most conditions that doctors treat patients for, there is a known standard of care.
Right.
And that should be the measure. So if one has not lived up to that standard or not provided that standard of care, then one can be called negligence. And in the medico-legal, when these cases are being looked at, it goes about what the standard of care is.
Right.
And it should not be confused with the best possible care.
Right.
So there's best possible care, and then there's a standard of care, and the two is not always the same.
Yeah. I suppose the question is, who sets these standards of care, and who determines that a doctor has crossed the line, as it were, and is negligent? Dr. Tlhape?
Well, the standard of care is set by the profession.
Right.
And that's why we are a profession of peers. So the peers in a discipline would determine what that minimum standard of care should be. Remember that as doctors, we speak about a scope of the profession. And if you are a doctor, you're expected to know what you know and to do what you trained for. And don't undertake things you are not trained for. So you have a scope of the profession. And that is why within that scope of the profession, there are accepted standards. And the standards are the same for a particular disease. The standard of delivery that is expected is the same. The standard of a cataract operation outcome would be the same, irrespective of who does it. And we expect that the one who does it will be the one who's been trained to do it, who knows what he's doing. So that's what the standard of care is about.
And who determines that a doctor has crossed the line and is negligent? And in simple terms, how do we define that?
We are a profession of peers. And that is why, if there is a complaint about care, we set up a committee of doctors that will adjudicate on that matter. And if it's a minor infringement, it will be sorted out at that level. If it is a serious infringement, it proceeds to the next level where we have a conduct inquiry, which will also constitute doctors, a member of the board, a member of the profession that you are registered in, another member of the profession, two community members, and a chairperson versed in law. And there'd also be a legal assessor. So the process is taken seriously, but it's still a professional process.
Talk about somebody vested in law. Let's cross over to Cape Town and speak to JP Ellis. Now, JP, you're a legal person yourself, and we're talking here about, obviously negligence and malpractice. Just briefly, just sketch to us, from your experience, is negligence or malpractice becoming worse in this country?
Thanks so much. Yes, it has. If I can just give you some background, in about the 1300s, where malpractice sort of originated from, in those times, physicians used to actually promise to their patients that they would provide a cure. And when that cure obviously was met, that would develop into the first sort of known instances of medical malpractice, and then so on it developed. And paradoxically, I suppose, as health standards and advancements in medical science and technology has increased and become far better and has advanced, we found that the instances of medical malpractice has just increased. And that's because of the reason that there's I suppose an unrealistic expectation that there wouldn't be complications. So whenever there is a complication, people immediately assume that that's due to negligence. So to come back to your question, yes, there has been an increase in medical malpractice litigation across the world, but in particular in South Africa.
Well, let's stay on that for a while and look at why is it that negligence, I mean, obviously we accept that doctors are human, and just apart from the fact that complications can happen, humans do make mistakes, but what are those factors that lead to these cases of negligence, in your opinion?
So what usually happens is that, and we're talking obviously specifically in the context of civil litigation where there's a claim for damage for an adverse surgical complication or adverse event, some sort of breach. And often it happens in the sense where we examine it in the context of the law of torts or delict. And what the courts usually do is the courts look at it from the perspective that a successful patient would need to fulfill a number of requirements. The first would be that there was an act or omission which the practitioner was responsible for that led to some injury that was causally relevant to that act, and that act would have to be wrongful and negligent. And how they assess that question of negligence is that, as my colleagues in the studio reiterated, they would assess it on the basis as whether it fell short of the recognized standards.
Gentlemen, let's come back to you. You know, that issue of doctors being human and doctors making mistakes. In the eyes of the public, are doctors allowed, let me put it bluntly like that, are doctors allowed to make mistakes, or should doctors be making mistakes? Your views?
This is a very complex issue. And if you're going to look at the research that was done into this, you will find that the people who are the doctors who are being sued were not always negligent. And the negligent doctors don't always get sued. So there are many issues around this, and it's a very complex issue, and it's a very difficult issue to manage and to fix. And one of the interesting things is the whole issue of expectations. And we see it in our own country. Gynecologists in this country doing private obstetrics or delivering babies pay up to R1 million a year in indemnity costs. While when general practitioners provide the same service, their cost is not nearly there. I'm not sure what their cost is, but it is not nearly there, because there are different expectations, and there's even evidence that if you work in what is called the center of excellence, you are more likely to get litigated against, because the expectations were so much more.
No, I understand that part, but let me get a view from
I think what people need to expect to understand is that complications do occur in the practice of medicine.
Yes.
And it would be defined with peers what are the expected complications within the context of a particular procedure. The second issue is that in medicine, outcomes are not guaranteed. So what we look at is whether you did what is expected of a professional in that position. We are not looking at an outcome, because you can do everything well and the outcome is not desired. I mean, I'm an ophthalmologist, and in retinal surgery, you have a detached retina. We can flatten the retina and still not be able to restore the vision, because the macula has been off for a long time. So we expect those issues. So those are the complexities, and that's why it needs to be looked at by professionals. And that's why we have informed consent, because we don't guarantee outcomes.
But talk about that
what we need to ensure is that there's a high level of professionalism from practitioners.
But also the correct type of information that's given out to the patients, isn't that so?
Oh, yes. I mean, the issue of information is quite important, but professionalism is quite important.
Right.
And what we are concerned with as the Health Professions Council is the decreasing professionalism amongst healthcare practitioners.
And I want us to talk about that. Let's just hold it here because it's time for a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion on medical malpractice and litigation. Please stay with us.
This is a space for every woman in South Africa.
I want to speak to the women who cannot walk a kilometer in this country without looking over their shoulders, without being groped or harassed.
I was not born like this. In 2011, I got stabbed by a boyfriend.
How many centimeters? How many centimeters long is the political will to end the scourge of violence against women, against children?
I was locked up in the room for 2 weeks.
There are measures, there are laws, there are policies. But these policies and measures and laws do not speak to these lived realities.
We must fight the culture of gender-based violence.
This is where young men must be taught that women are not their footballs. This is where young men must be taught to respect women.
Join the Trends Travel team this Saturday as Celebe explores the beauty of the Ghanaian arts and culture. Eloise traded her heels and makeup for running shoes at South Africa's first Spartan Race Challenge in Muldersdrift, west of Johannesburg. Music takes center stage at the Nyrox Sculpture Park in celebration of Tata Nelson Mandela's centenary. For all this and more, tune into Trends Travel on SABC News at 5:30 p.m. and repeat every Mondays at 5 a.m.
I don't care that the outcome said culpable homicide. I'm sitting here and I'm saying to the public, because that's what I believe in, that was literal murder. That daughter was literally slaughtering my daughter to death. It was either he get the money or my daughter's life. And then I got a call and the person on the other line was like, your daughter is late. Which mortuary must we take her to? It was Dr. van der Walt. How do you deliver such news to a mother?
Daweti's 12-year journey seeking justice for her daughter Pamela began.
I went to report the incident to the manager of the hospital at the time, who said they will make sure that they investigate and come back to me. This is 12 years later. I've never received a call in Cosmos Hospital. There was a disciplinary hearing apparently, but the doctor paid to cut it short. You know, there's a long process. If they call me and then we go the investigation process, it takes so long. But instead, they charged the doctor 10,000 for admission of guilt to cut the process. I was never called by HPCSA. So to me, I feel like they failed me.
For 4 years, Daweti alleges that her case didn't move because of corruption by prosecutors until the senior prosecutor intervened.
Then he asked me all those prosecutors. Then I told them, then he called them. I remember this one saying, no, we were told that there's conflict of interest. in this case. Remember, he's staying in Witbank, they stay in Witbank, they play golf, they go to church, they do all those things. So my case couldn't go anywhere because there's a conflict of interest. It has been a long journey, eh? And in this journey, people gave up on my behalf. Prayer partners, some of them gave up on my behalf. My family was like, this is traumatic.
Daweti penned her 12-year journey in a book.
I went through an operation, shoulder operation. My arm couldn't work. Remember, the information is here in my head. The entire book, I wrote it through the cell phone, you know, and then I will send it to the email, you know. That's how this book has been written.
All right, welcome back. So of course we have these cases of, you know, litigation or lawsuits against medical professionals or hospitals because of cases of malpractice or negligence. And here to help us tackle this is Professor Leon Snyman, Chair of the Medical Legal Committee at SASOC, Dr. Khoseli Tlhape, President of HPGSA, and of course from our Cape Town studio, JP Ellis, Legal Manager at Ethica. Let's stay in Cape Town and JP, talk about, now obviously moving towards litigation, to say, of course, we've discussed issues around, you know, malpractice and, you know, negligence, as it were. But you have these cases, as I said before, you have cases of lawsuits because of negligence. Just give us a sense of who is being litigated against in this instance. Is it the medical professional, or is there a difference between the private sector and the public sector?
Thanks. So the issues are equally borne by both the public sector and private sector. You find that these type of cases are not peculiar to one sector. Both sectors are inundated with cases of medical malpractice litigation. Just coming back to an earlier point that Professor Snyman made about, you know, these claims that are sort of brought against gynecologists and obstetricians. Something that one has to keep in mind is that we all accept that there are these cases. In some cases, there are isolated instances where there's negligence, and in other cases, we find that there's quite a bit of, there are frivolous cases. So one has to put it into perspective, because what we find is that, having looked at the figures and what the contingent liability sits at for the state, for example, and we know that many of these cases, the high value claims or the cerebral palsy claims, those are the ones, the more lucrative ones, where personal injury lawyers are really sort of trying to get their hands on, because if you look at it from the perspective that the quality of obstetrics and gynecology in South Africa are world class. I mean, we know that we've got some of the leading people in South Africa, and generally the quality is very good. And it begs the question, why are there so many of these cases focused on obstetrics and gynecology? Well, the answer is that unfortunately, if you look at it, those are just the most lucrative cases. So naturally, plaintiff attorneys who make their money or their livelihood from this see it as a big potential earning possibility of seeking out these cases. So that's the one thing. The other thing is that, just in terms of trends, we've noticed that there's been a massive spike in the value and the frequency of these type of claims. And they cater for all sorts of high-risk specialities: neurosurgery, obstetrics, cardiothoracic, orthopedics, plastic and reconstructive surgery. So the high-risk specialties where you cut people open and you sort of have surgical interventions, those are the ones that are the most at risk, because the minute you start getting to those realms, it becomes very difficult, because there's often complications, and people take that as a sign that there could be negligence, and they often pursue those cases. And again, just putting it into perspective, whilst there is that huge contingent liability, one also has to keep in mind that there has to be that closing the loop, in the sense that one has to also monitor and see exactly how many of those contingent liability cases, those contingent liabilities are actually successful. So it's one thing to say that if all these cases were successful against the state, it would run into tens of billions, but of those cases that are successful, it might be a fraction of that. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
He's using a very interesting term, lucrative, that some cases are lucrative for the legal fraternity. And I guess it comes back to the reasons for the increase in, number of claims, on these matters. Now, somebody suggested that perhaps just apart from patients or members of the public becoming more aware of their rights that they can litigate, but the role that the legal profession is playing in this, people mentioned the issue around, well, since the road accident fund was restructured, the taps were closed, as it were, and people saw an opportunity. I'd like your comments on that, please. And anyone, yeah.
I think it's multifactorial.
Yeah.
There might be an element from the fact that the tap has been closed on the road accident fund.
Yeah.
But I think there's also a fundamental issue where the healthcare system is not properly prepared for these issues.
Yeah.
If you are harmed, why do you need an expensive lawyer to show that you've been harmed by the healthcare? Why should we not be setting up a no-fault compensation system? What it also enables you is that if it's a no-fault compensation system, the professionals own up to what has happened, and you are able to take corrective measures of what went wrong so that you can fix it. So there's a problem when you create something that's a potential for business.
Right.
And we, as a system, should be closing that loop.
Yeah.
There should be a statutory fund that all healthcare practitioners pay into, which becomes your fidelity fund, that compensates not on the basis of fault, on a no-fault compensation system, and you have a system that works. But the key issue also is that in our processes in the HPCSA, there's lack of documentation.
Right.
And
I'll tell you what,
sometimes-
let's hold it there. Let's take Vincent on the line from the Free State. Vincent, welcome to Health Talk.
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir.
How are you, sir?
We're good. How are you, Vincent? Your question, please.
Sorry?
Yeah, do you have a question or comment for us?
Yes, I just want to ask something. I've been watching this program here on TV.
Yes.
And see, the hospital once, I'm not in English, I'm not educated,
Yes.
but I'm a Motswana.
Yes.
Yes. The hospital once, how can I put it?
Bua ka Setswana ra.
Or ke bua Setswana ra?
Yeah, bua.
Hospital ya gisa ko ra ke ding tse segole.
Yes.
Yeah. But ke ntho tsa khale that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you look at it now, I'm now old, I'm now 58 years of age.
Okay.
Then
But
I'm
you
now
to ro
58
ire nyano. Right.
Ke utlwa kona go kwa manoko a teng.
All right. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Vincent. Quickly, I mean, he says that he went to hospital some many years ago. He's 58 years of age. He went to hospital some many years ago. Now he's crippled as a result of some procedure that was done to him in hospital, and he basically would like to know what to do from here. You're more than welcome to give your opinion.
I think so. It goes to the issue why we advocating for a no-fault compensation.
Yeah.
Because if a patient was harmed, it would have been looked at.
Yeah.
In that instance, as an unfavorable outcome,
Yeah.
and you would have investigated.
Yes.
It would not be up to the patient, because there's also the duty of care. That if you have a complication,
Yeah.
we have a duty to manage that complication, to ensure that we give you the assistance that you need to lead as normal a life as possible. Because our quest is to improve the quality of life so that people should be pain-free and be free of disease. So now, once you do that, there'll be a prospective aspect. I mean, when I trained, there used to be an infant and mortality meeting that happened in the ONG department where I came from, without fear or favor. But because there was no issue of prosecution. It was an issue of fearlessly going into, did we have any mothers that died?
Yeah.
Did we have any babies that died? Could it have been prevented? What could we have done to do it better? And they would openly participate, because nobody is going to be crucified, but they would ensure that once we improve the standard of care, once we change the clinical guideline, and we move it up because of what we've learned, everybody moves to that standard. And we improve in the quality of care.
All right.
Now, when it's an issue of litigation,
Yeah.
people will say, the profession protects each other. You know, I'm a surgeon, and the only surgeon that has no complications is the one that doesn't operate enough, or that has no list. That's the general saying.
So that's the risk that he was talking about. Perhaps you want to just comment finally?
Yeah, I think the issue in obstetrics, to come back to your question of why it's lucrative and why it's big, it's because obstetrics is a high risk thing. And one of the recent quotes that somebody in one of these articles said that it has never been safer to deliver a baby, but it's never been more dangerous to be a gynecologist delivering the baby. Because, you know, if you look at what the big cost drivers are in terms of claims, it is the biggest one is babies born, and when something goes wrong in the birth process, the baby suffers brain damage. So those claims go into the 20 million category. The second group is where chromosomal abnormalities were missed. For instance, a Down syndrome. So the doctor did not pick up that there was a Down syndrome. And those ones are easily 13 million that goes. And the same for structural abnormalities missed on sonar. So these are big claims. And as Dr. Letlape has said, it becomes a business because these claims are done on a contingency basis, which means that if they don't win, then there's no fee for the plaintiff in that matter. And when that 25 million pays out, then there's a certain cut for the lawyers in that.
I think, Silo, we've got to accept that there are some aspects of law where people are looking for business and they are running businesses. And wherever they see the opportunity to make money, they'll come to make money. And we in healthcare have to be mindful of the fact that our field can be seen, or has now been seen, as an area where money can be made. And we've got to be proactive in terms of how we manage those issues.
Okay, when I come back to how we become proactive. Time for a quick break. When we come back, we discuss further on litigation and malpractice. Please stay with us.
We probe. His bone crushed on 3 places. So he said, well, we're going to have to amputate. And I was like, what? We confront.
This young girl was abducted when she was 16. She was sold off by her older sister. Now, in grade 11, she has 3 children.
And we expose.
Wandizinikele ngiyawuthini ngandikwazayo apha lo mnunkazi uzondidubula.
Catch Special Assignment every Sunday at 9:30 right here on SABC News Channel.
How many centimeters long is the political will to end the scourge of violence against women, against children?
With issues of special favors, there is a benefactor and a beneficiary. Both of them have benefited.
Welcome back. If you've just joined us, we're talking medical malpractice and litigation with our guests from the HPCSA, head of president of the HPCSA, Dr. Khosi Letlape, Professor Leon Snyman from SASOC, and of course in our Cape Town studio, JP Ellis, legal manager at Ethical. Now, earlier on, perhaps let's start with you, JP. Clearly, medical malpractice or negligence obviously has a huge impact on people. And as we heard in that clip that we played, the process, let's just go through the process of litigation. There were allegations made that sometimes, there's corruption in there, and it depends on how deep your pockets are that, you get cases, easily. And perhaps if you're on the other side, being the one that's obviously bringing the lawsuit, if you have the best lawyer in town, of course, you can win the case. Just take us through the process. Is there corruption as was alleged in that clip?
Yes. So I mean, there's a number of issues here. It's quite difficult for just an ordinary member of the public to bring such a lawsuit and to bring a successful claim against a medical practitioner. So what often happens is that you have personal injury lawyers that make these services available on a contingency basis, as Professor Snyman pointed out earlier. So the Contingency Fee Act of 1997 makes it's got obviously a noble cause. It allows very indigent people access to legal services that they otherwise would not have had. The problem, however, is that once the personal injury lawyer takes on the case on contingency, his success fee is dependent on the outcome of the case. So immediately you'll see that the lines between the client and the attorney gets blurred, and that's a big problem. And once a matter then is referred to a personal injury lawyer, effectively the lawyer then sort of takes control of the litigation and how that matter proceeds. And there's a number of ways in which they can sort of deal with that. I mean, you've got they could, in that particular case, they could have obviously brought an HPCSA complaint. They could have launched civil proceedings. There could have been criminal proceedings, an inquest, etc. So there's a number of mechanisms in order to try and bring malpractice to light.
Okay.
The most often thing that we would see is a civil litigation or a claim for damages against the practitioner. And if one were to take the classic case of a cerebral palsy claim, you would find that the lawyer would act on behalf of the parents of a minor child, who would then launch a claim for damages against the obstetrician, together with the hospital, potentially the anaesthetist and the pediatrician, or in the case of a public sector claim, it would be against the MEC for health for that particular provincial department. And then once the litigation commences, the service of the summons, you then start the litigation process, and that could take years to finalize. And our courts have been inundated with these type of matters. And as I pointed out earlier, is that there are some cases that are frivolous, and there are those meritorious cases that should be dealt with and should be heard. Okay. But now, obviously, by having a lot of these unmeritorious cases, it's at the risk that the claims with merit don't get heard. So it's a long, tedious process. It's quite a lot of emotion, financially prohibitive, and it's very expensive to litigate in this country. All right. So litigation is not the only way of resolving these matters. In the last year or so, there's been quite a lot of proposition for or advocating for mediation as an alternative dispute.
I'll tell you what, JP, we'll come back to you just now to hear more about the, and I'm sorry to interject.
Are starting to look at mediation as a viable option or way of trying to resolve matters.
Okay, I'll come back to you just now. Let's take Buisela on the line. Buisela, you with us? Yeah?
Thank you, Dr. Silo.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm happy that I managed to talk to you. I just want to mention a few things before I can go to my question.
Can I restrict you perhaps, because we're running quickly out of time? Can I just restrict you to your question? Yeah.
Oh, okay. I hear. I think it's Doctor from HPCSA, Dr. Hosi.
Yes.
He's saying doctors are human.
Yes.
Therefore, they can make mistakes.
Yeah.
That is the very same reason why I went back to Dr. van der Walt.
Okay.
Because 16 days prior the death of my daughter, I was pregnant twins.
Yeah.
Where he gave me a tablet and said the twins are not growing. And he gave me a tablet to insert in my vagina, saying that he wants the twins to grow. And the following day, I miscarried. So I took it as a natural miscarriage. And I went back to him because we were consulting both myself and my daughter to him.
Yeah.
But I realized later, after the death of my daughter, that apparently he gave me abortion tablets when I went to the pharmacist. And now, doctor, I want to say, as much as we are saying they have the rights, but in this case, I'm still maintaining saying this was literal murder. Because he was angry that my daughter was giving birth natural.
Okay, thank you very much, Buyisela, for sharing your story on that question. Perhaps let me get a comment firstly on what she said from you, Prof. And also I need to come back to you, Dr. Letlhapa, about the process at HPCSA. Yeah, very quickly.
Yeah, it's difficult to comment on what was said because there are other things that people insert that is not abortion pills.
Yeah.
I think an important concept is that of a complication.
Right.
You know, and a complication, especially after surgery, does not mean a mistake was made.
Yes.
We as doctors, especially those in surgical disciplines, we know if I do a hysterectomy, I know what organs are at risk of being injured, like the bladder, like the ureter.
Yeah.
And we know what precautions we can take to minimize the risk. But it minimizes the risk. It does not take it out.
But
so I can do whatever I want to, and I can still get the complication. And,
so
and that
the
is then
patient
construed
perception
as a mistake because of the concept of outcome. The outcome wasn't good. I did not get my hysterectomy and go home 2 days later and back to work 2 weeks later. I ended up 6 weeks having to add 2 or 3 other operations.
Okay. But an important aspect is patient's perception, which is very important in terms of how they view the quality, isn't that so?
Yeah.
So it's about what sort of engagement is there before the procedure to say what can you expect?
Yes, but you see, people need to understand that complications occur. Now, in terms of a profession, we expect you to be able to manage complications. We expect you to be able to pick them up and then put the right remedies. So what is more important? And that's the constellation of professionalism. I mean, if you nick a ureter, we expect you to be able to pick it up and to ensure that it is fixed.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's when you don't pick it up and it complicates and then it becomes a peritonitis that we have a problem with your ability.
Yeah.
So it's lack of professionalism and we're going into negligence.
Yeah.
So people need to
Dr.
understand that. For example, when you have postpartum bleeding, we know it occurs.
Yeah.
What we need to know, what you need to demonstrate is that you know how to manage it and you did everything according to the book to manage it.
Yeah.
And that's why we talk about professionalism. If there are things beyond your control that might lead to an unfavorable outcome and eventual death of a patient, you need to provide the data. But there's an important
I'll tell you what, before that, we have to take a break. When we come back, we finalize our discussion now on medical litigation and malpractice, and of course, look at the way forward. Please stay with us.
Need to know more about the markets? This is where it all starts, at the SABC's headquarters in Auckland Park in Johannesburg, South Africa. We analyze, report, crunch the numbers, call in the experts, package the news, and bring you critical global market updates from the JSE.
The continent's leaders in liquid market movement and the fastest growing secondary listings made right here.
Small businesses, the backbone of the economy. With South Africa's very high unemployment rate, it's said that 90% of new jobs could come from this sector.
Every weekday afternoon on DSTV, channel 404.
SABC is independent and impartial, and it's important that as we deliver the news, we do so without fear, without favour, without prejudice, and that we ensure that we get the multiplicity of views so that our stories and coverage is balanced.
We pride ourselves on being impartial as well as independent. On the agenda, we basically break down the stories of the day, give it more substance and give it more detail. So all in all, we basically take the news agenda of the day forward.
But more than that, we'll be able to reflect the stories
of ordinary folk, people who are trying to make ends meet, facing the most incredibly difficult obstacles and circumstances, and that they will find that their realities are expressed on the SABC.
To be a part of something like this makes me proud, and I think that to be able to report the news in a fair, just, independent and impartial way is what the public broadcaster stands for.
Welcome back. We're talking medical malpractice and litigation with our guests, Prof. Leon Snyman, Dr. Khosile Tlhape, and JP Ellis. And we're in the final stage of our program, obviously. Gentlemen, I'd like us to just wrap up because unfortunately we've run out of time. And I'm going to give you about a minute and a half, Prof. So clearly litigation has an impact on the profession, and especially the obstetricians and gynecologists. Can you perhaps just take us through that, and let's talk about the way forward?
The impact is severe. We have done some research from SASOC's side. There are many gynecologists indicating that they don't see themselves in the next 5 years still delivering babies. Now, Graham Howarth of the MPS wrote an article that was published in the SAMJ in 2013 looking at this and asked the question, you know, by the end of this decade, will private practice be able to afford indemnity insurance to deliver the service? And if that stops, what the impact would be? And just in short, there's about just under 140,000 deliveries in private practice a year in South Africa. If that work plus the risk of indemnity insurance goes to the state, what the state would need is a hospital like Baragwana Hospital, Chris Hani Baragwana Hospital, delivers about 17,000 babies a year. And that is the biggest hospital in the Southern Hemisphere. So you would need an additional 8 Baragwana Hospital obstetric capacity to deal with the private sector if private obstetric stops. And it has happened. In Ireland it has happened. In Australia it has happened that one day there was private obstetrics, the next day there wasn't, because it can't be afforded. Okay. So whatever we do, we need to do it by tomorrow.
All right. Let's get a view. Before I come to you, Dr. Tlhape, let me go across to JP Ellis. JP, let me get your final minute and a half in terms of, you know, the way forward. Obviously, we've learned about the impact that this has on the profession. Your views on the way forward?
So, having had similar conversations in the past, we've gotten to a point where I think there's a lot of consensus now, and regardless of my comments earlier about, you know, the litigation environment and how the medical legal crisis has impacted the sustainability of healthcare in the country, I think that there's a lot of consensus in South Africa at the moment that the way forward is collaboration between private practice, the public sector, government representatives, hospital groups, insurance and indemnifiers, and key stakeholders like consumer groups and the legal profession, in order to find a way of protecting and securing the sustainability of our healthcare industry. I mean, at the moment, if it goes on this way, as Professor Snyman pointed out, I mean, the risk is that our obstetric provision of health services is at risk of collapsing. And obviously we can't do that. I mean, what are we going to tell our grandchildren that they can't deliver any babies? You know, right. It's a completely untenable situation, and the only way to go forward is to collaborate.
All right, collaborate. Dr. Tlhape?
No fault compensation.
Right.
Proper health records. Limitation of damages.
So proper health records. What do you mean? Do we not have proper?
We don't have proper health records.
Yeah.
When we adjudicate on our cases, and we're looking for hospital records, we can't find them. You can't find them from the state. In private, you can't have access to them because they say it's their property. And that compromises our ability to adjudicate on matters. So there has to be a national health record that is accessible to the patient and accessible to the regulators. And because that record belongs to the patient. Unless we do that, we don't have information. We've got to apply the basics of law. That if there is no record, there's no case. We've got to change the paradigm that it is for you to prove a case against the practitioner, not for a practitioner to prove themselves guilty in accordance with other areas of law. So people make records disappear, and then you have an admission of guilt based on no facts because there are no records. The issue about damages. Now, if it is about healthcare and you got your care from the public healthcare system, your future care comes from the public healthcare system. Okay. There should be no monies paid out for future care. Yeah.
Unfortunately,
the state should guarantee
this is all the
that you
time
get
we
the
have.
future care.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your contribution. Obviously, this is an emotive subject, and we just need more time
no
on
lawyers.
it. And
no lawyers.
Of course.
It's a professional
to you
matter.
viewers at home, and thank you so much for your calls. Thank you for watching. We'll be back on the screen next week, same time. And until then, I'm Dr. Solomon Dao. Please do take care.
We want legal